Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome to a very special game from the TCEC season 23 bonus competition. It's now cheese versus the best engine in the world versus Stockfish 15, and recently we have covered many great games played by the Dragon engine. The Dragon engine took the lead in one particular moment of the super event of the TCEC season 23 bonus competition, but I think now things are getting normal again, because now again Stockfish is in the lead, has half of the point more than Dragon and has also one game less, so probably of course Stockfish will win again a new super event. So I think this temporary lead by the Dragon engine was because Stockfish didn't play maybe the same lines that the Dragon engine so far played in the tournament. In the later stage of this event, Stockfish played and the repeated games that also the Dragon engine played, so it was, I think, as the title says, I think just a glitch in the matrix. Still I think even in the direct duel, I think the Stockfish 15 engine would destroy the Dragon engine for sure. So let's see now a beautiful game played by Stockfish 15 here with the black pieces. We have again the Nimzo-Indian defense on the board. I think if you want to study something with the black pieces against d4, the Nimzo-Indian is in my opinion the best way, and I think there is a certain approach after move knight to f3 that I would recommend you, which also the Stockfish engine applied here, so that's why I think it's an instructive game. But then in the later stage we'll see immortal tactics again by played by the fish. So let's see now the game. So it's cheese versus the Stockfish 15 engine in the Nimzo-Indian defense. So d4 we're here played by cheese, knight to f6, we have c4, e6, knight to c3, and after move bishop to b4 the Nimzo-Indian is on the board. And here many things can be played. We have now again the normal variation with the move e3. Yesterday we have covered a beautiful game played by Ramesh Babu Pragnananda with the black pieces against Anish Giri, in which Bergh also destroyed Anish here in the normal variation with the black pieces. After move e3, my recommendation, and also the Stockfish engine plays this line, and also Bergh played here simply kingside casting. And now after move knight to f3, whenever you see the move knight to f3 in the Nimzo-Indian defense, I would recommend you to go into the Ragozin defense with the move d5. Whenever your opponent is choosing maybe something else, so d3, bishop to d3, you still can break the position with the move d5. But for instance, if queen to c2, queen to b3 happens, you can maybe break the position with the move c5. But every time, whenever you see the move knight to f3, I would recommend you to move d5. And look at this, after move bishop to e2, you can even make further progress with the move c5. The problem, I think, for white, when you break through here like this with c5, d5, e6, bishop to v4, you have really an aggressive approach here. The problem, I think, for white is here that white cannot take any of these pawns. White cannot challenge you here in the center if with some moves like d takes c5, because if that happens, you just simply play knight from b to d7. If you get challenged maybe with the move a3, you simply takes, and now you can play, of course, d takes c4, bishop to c4, and now you can even take knight takes c5. And look at this, white is left now with two weak pawns, with this pawn on c3 and a3. You can simplify the game by trading off the queens. Maybe in the later stage you play b6, bishop to b7, and I guarantee you you'll have a good game here for sure. The evaluation, believe me or not, in this particular position is already +1 for black, so it's really incredible. So that's why you should not worry about this move c5. Even if c takes d5 happens, it's not such a huge problem. You first take c takes d4, after knight to d4 you can even play e5, because after, for instance, e takes d4, then of course you see after knight to d5 white is always left with an isolated pawn. So many times when this trades of pawns happens in the center of the board, white wants to recapture with the knight, but now comes, I think, the normal idea of this line, e5, you're kicking away the knight, and now you can even play the move knight to d5. Look at this, you're simply continuing the pressure. After something like queen to b3, even bishop to e6 is an opportunity, simply getting an attack against the queen. So as I said, you should not worry, d5, and then afterwards you play c5. So you should really break in this Ragozin structure the center immediately. Now you are the one that can trade off some pawns in the center of the board. I think it's very important, and it's a very important study. Here I think you have already already equalized the game from black's perspective. So we have now kingside castling played by this engine cheese. We have d takes c4, not a problem, bishop to c4, and now we play c takes d4. So you see, whatever white does now, I think black has, as I said, equalized the game. For instance, if you play knight to d4, the problem is now here a6, b5 can happen, and now also ideas of queen to c7 are working. You see, you can attack the bishop and then also attack the knight. So both of these pieces are lined up on the c file, and there is a threat of bishop to c3, maybe followed with queen takes c3. You can maybe gain a pawn. So as I said, this is the way to go. In the continuation, after c takes d4, this cheese engine took with the pawn, e takes d4, because even if you take with the knight, not only this problem happens with a6 b5, the problem is always in these types of structures that the bishop is a little bit paralyzed by its own pawn structure here on this diagonal. The e3 pawn is standing in the way of the dark square bishop. So that's why after e takes d4, now b6. And the cool part now is that we're playing here from black's perspective against an isolated pawn. Whenever you face an isolated pawn, the normal idea is to create a blockade against this isolated pawn, or at least protect the pawn, pardon me, the square, till this square can be, of course, this pawn can be advanced to d5. So that's why we want to protect the square with bishop to b7. Maybe the knight is already there. You see the bishop on c3, bishop on b4 is attacking the knight on c3, that's controlling the d5 square. So now in the beginning, basically, it's a huge battle for the d5 square. So in the continuation, we have bishop to d3. So here the cheese engine is trying maybe some ideas of bishop to g5, getting the bishop queen somehow maybe on c2, attacking also the h7 weakest. So we have now bishop to b7, and now a rook to e1. The problem, I think, if you play something like bishop to g5 here immediately to get rid of at least one of these defenders of the d5 square, is that you will probably get challenged immediately with the move h6. If you play bishop to h4, the normal here move would be knight to c6. It's not a mistake. We can of course immediately attack the pawn on d4, and I'm not seeing good ways how white should not now defend this position. White can maybe play something like bishop to c2, but we can even maneuver the knight here, maybe to g6 to f5. Probably in this scenario, white would take bishop to f6, g takes f6, maybe it would play something like queen to d3, but f5 I think solves every problem. And look at this, now we can occupy the d5 square, still we have a control, and white is still continuing the game with an isolated pawn here on a d4. We still have the bishop pair, so in my opinion this should be perfectly fine position here for black. So as I said, you should not also worry. I'm telling you about this line because you would be worried about this move bishop to g5. What should we do? We get pinned, we don't like suddenly this position. Doesn't matter. I think this is defendable here from white's perspective. So that's why rook to e1 was played by cheese. Cheese is trying probably to occupy now the e5 weakness. So in the continuation, we have h6, not allowing now the spin anymore. We have a3, we have bishop to d6. Now Stockfish 15 is controlling further the e5 square. We have bishop to e3, knight from b to d7, and now after move knight to g5, we have bishop to b8. Then okay, this knight kicked away the bishop, but we have to agree, I think, this knight will not stay there forever. We still can kick it away with the move a6. So we have now h3 by cheese, and now a6, knight to c3, and now bishop to b5. And I want you to pay good attention how strong now really the bishop pair of blacks is here. The bishop is controlling here this long diagonal light for bishop. This other bishop is also attacking the h2 weakness. Now what we are trying to do as a tactical plan maybe is to play something like queen to c7, bishop to f3, and deliver maybe an annoying check here on h2. This could be, I think, a decent idea. So in the continuation, we have rook to c1 by cheese. Now cheese is not allowing the queen to get here on c7, and of course this is a normal move. Cheese is occupying the only open file, the open c file. So we have bishop to c7, we have knight to d2, and now rook to c8 here. Stockfish is at least temporarily competing now against this rook on c1. So knight to e4, we have bishop to b8. Look at this beautiful maneuver by the bishop. The bishop played many times now in the opening, but what the Stockfish 15 engine is doing is keeping the rooks connected and is just maneuvering the bishop here on this diagonal. So here Stockfish didn't lose any of this activity with both of these bishops, and is still now competing on the c file. Now Stockfish can play something like queen to e7, maybe connecting the rooks, and Stockfish would have a fully development with all of the pieces. So here the continuation, we have a rook to c2, bishop to a8, we have queen to c1, and now queen to c7. This is now a beautiful idea. Let's see, the Stockfish is already threatening some wild tactical shots. The problem is now you cannot of course move this knight to f6, knight to f6, nothing can be played. Knight to b5 doesn't work, you get first a check here, so it's simply not working. So that's why after move queen to c7, g3 was played by this engine Cheese, and now queen to b7. Stockfish gets out of the range, so Stockfish first attacked this diagonal. Now when this diagonal got closed, now you see the Cheese engine opened this other diagonal. So it's really pleasing for the eye how Stockfish is now playing the game. After move queen to b7, we have f3. Now Cheese has to lock every of this long diagonals, but this pawn structure is really weird. All of the 3 pawns in front of the king are advanced. I'm not sure when I saw the last time such a pawn structure, such a weakened pawn structure in front of the king. So it's quite already a messed up position, I think, in White's camp. So in the continuation, we have knight to h7. What Stockfish is trying to do is somehow maybe play knight to g5, maybe knight to f6, further challenging simply this knight, because Stockfish wants suddenly to open this long diagonal, and also the g3 can be now an object of Black's attack. So we have rook to f1. Now Cheese is finally protecting the f3 weakness. We have now rook to d8, knight to e2, and now comes what is, in my opinion, one of the critical moments of this game. So Stockfish has, I think, a decent activity here with the minor pieces, with the queen, with the rooks, and whenever you feel that basically you cannot improve any of your pieces on the board, then probably your next move should be sort of a pawn move. So that's why I think this next move by Stockfish makes really sense. e5 is trying now just to open the position further in the center of the board, although it creates a position where White will not probably have any more the isolated pawn, but it was simply now time to open the position because of the beautiful piece activity. In my opinion, when we watch now this position, Black's pieces are much more active. Look at this, these pieces of White's, okay, they are centralized, but they are not having, I think, such a great activity like Black's pieces. So after move e5, the game becomes really tactical. From this point on, we'll see now really a tactical feast here, because after move e5, the problem is now this tactical shot that the Cheese engine prepared, bishop to h6. The problem about this move bishop to h6 is that you cannot take here the bishop on h6, because it leads into a draw. Now the line would be queen to h6, and in order to make something out of this position, you have to compete now with the queen here to b6. Of course, queen to c6 is not working because the rook is covering the square. I'm telling you this because you would love to play queen to c6, but actually you have to compete with queen to b6. But the problem is now this overloaded knight here on d7. I'll explain it what's the point. Now of course White will play knight to f6, and look at this, whatever you do, for instance, if you take with the queen or with the move queen to f6, then of course we have here a beautiful checkmate on h7. So you would be forced here to take out with one of these knights, but here after move knight from d to f6, you see, as we said, the knight is a little bit overloaded. Now you get this one, bishop to h7, and you couldn't take with this knight because the queen is hanging. So you would be forced to take out this knight with this knight, but now the game leads into perpetual queen to g5, again just a couple of checks, and it's a draw. So as I said, after move bishop to h6, the problem is now Black cannot take out the bishop. It's a huge tactical problem. So that's why Stockfish plays now a very important move. First, e takes d4, and this move is very important because this pawn will be now the most aggressive piece on the board. Believe me or not, this is now a monstrous pawn, In the continuation, we have now knight to g5. Stockfish got challenged here around square h7, and now comes a beautiful move here by Stockfish 15. Maybe you can pause the video and try to see now the best continuation here for black. It's really a wild move. Maybe just take your time and try to see now the best continuation. So this game reminds me a little bit of the game, if you know the beautiful tactical game between Levon Aronian against Vishwanath Anand, where Anand sacrificed also something around the square h7. So he sacrificed the pawn, allowed Levon Aronian to get here an activity around the square h7, but then counterplayed beautifully with some minor pieces with beautiful activity. So here also the Stockfish engine sacrificed just the knight here on h7, played simply knight to e5. Is attacking now the bishop on d3. The problem is now after bishop to h7, that was continuation. The problem is I think you cannot play this idea knight to g5. That's I think a huge problem, because queen to g5 is going to happen, and now you're vulnerable here around the square g7. So that's why the only move, as I said, was the move knight to e5. Now bishop to h7 was played by this engine cheese, but now comes the beautiful here move king to h8, and it's such a tense position now already. Look at this. The problem is the bishop is also hanging. It's blocked out by its own knight, so it was I think only a temporarily sacrifice of the knight here on h7. Now Stockfish is taking over, and look at this. Now this pawn on d4 is becoming really now the best piece. As I said, now d3 is also a huge threat. So we have now bishop to e4, queen to b6 comes now with the indirect attack against the king, because d3 comes of course with a beautiful discovered check. So we have now bishop to g7, king to g7, and there is not a good way anymore to escape from this d3. We're threatening also the fork, we're threatening also the check. So maybe you could try here rook to d2 in order to escape from these ideas, but now still bishop to e4. We have knight to e4, and look at this d3, and still will simply win the piece here. So it's I think game over for white. So after move king to g7, that's why we have bishop to a8 here played by this cheese engine, but now comes d3, king to h1, and now Stockfish took the rook, and from this point on Stockfish has no position where Stockfish is up the exchange. So really great tactical sequence that the fish saw here. After move d takes c2, we have f4, we have f6 counterattack against the knight, we have f takes e5, and now bishop to e5. The knight is still hanging, but also now the bishop is hanging here on a8. So we have here now knight to f3, we have rook to a8, we have queen to c2, knight takes e5 doesn't make sense. I think we have simply f takes e5. You cannot even then take out the pawn on c2. The rook is hanging, so the problem is now the f file will be opened, the queen will come also into the game, the king is a little bit naked, so it's game over again for white. So after move rook to a8, as we said, queen to c2 was played. At least now the cheese engine took this very annoying pawn, but now of course queen to e6, centralizing more pieces. Here queen to c4, trying to simplify the game by trading off the queens. Queen takes c4, b takes c4, knight to d4, bishop to d4, and now Stockfish goes into a favorable endgame where Stockfish has a rook against the knight. Okay, we have to say here the cheese engine has now also passed around the h file, but it's simply too slow. The rook's activity is perfectly fine here by black. So rook to c1, we have rook to c8, rook to c2, rook to d8, attacking now the knight. We have knight to e2, rook to d3, cutting off now the potential activity by the king, not allowing here the king to come in the center of the board. We have now knight to c1, attacking now the rook to d1. We have king to f3, and now a4 here, a5, pardon me, here also trying a4. Then of course rook to b8 is an opportunity maybe to grab this pawn on b2. So we have here now knight to e2, rook to d3, a check. Now king to g6, again an attack against the rook to d4, a check. We have rook to f3, and now c3. This is I think a decent choice, because whenever you face this kind of an endgame, what you want from black's perspective to create here is a passed pawn. So we want finally to get maybe this a pawn as a pass pawn, even if you create maybe your opponent here a passer, but with the support of the rook, this pawn is basically unstoppable. So that's why we have here d takes c3. But now rook to a4, you cannot of course protect the pawn, because you get then rook to c3 and then you lose the pawn on a3 anyway. So that's why here h4, rook takes a3, we have now knight to e2 and now a4. So it's a different position now when we have the passer or when we don't have the passer. If you could just imagine maybe this position without these two pawns, maybe without the pawn on a4 and maybe without the pawn on c3, then this position would probably be a draw, although black is up the exchange. But with the passer, it's completely winning. So we have king to e4, king to f7, c4, now rook to e8, the check, and now rook to b3, preparing now for the progress of the pawn. So knight to c3, we have a3, now attacking simply here the pawn. The rook is coming into the game. We have knight to d5, and now rook to e8 is preparing, of course, rook to b2 and a further progress of the a pawn. Knight to c7, we have a rook to a4, knight to d5, and now comes this idea, rook to b2 is simply winning the game. Knight to c3, rook takes a2, knight takes, and now getting the rook on the a file, and we want to simply push the pawn further. c5, we have rook to g8, attacking now also this pawn. Here the king is close enough to this pawn. If white eventually tries to push it, then of course the king can catch up, and here the rook is still active. So h5, rook takes g3, c6, king to e6. You see the king is perfectly fine. We have king to c5, rook to g2, attacking now the knight, knight to b4, rook to g5, a check, and now also here Stockfish takes another pawn. Knight to c2, pushing the pawn further. We have now c7, and now after move king to d7, nothing can happen. We'll still have this pawn, so the position is simply too stretched here for the knight, so it's completely winning here for black. So knight to a1, we have an attack here, knight to b3, rook to b1, king to c5, rook to b3. In this position the cheese engine resigned. So incredible game, really wild tactics in the middle game stage where Stockfish allowed this sacrifice on h7, but I think we have seen also a decent opening line. I think if you are searching for something against d4, and I'm sure some of you are searching, then as I said, after move knight to f3, we want to play d5, and then you just break the position with the move c5. Don't worry so much about d takes c5 or c takes d5. Whatever happens, I think you have a decent activity, and that's the beauty, I think, about the Nimzo-Indian defense, in my opinion. Really one of the best openings against d4. So I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. As I said, the Stockfish engine took the lead. It's really incredible how the tournament went so far. It was a pure domination in the beginning by the Dragon engine. Now Stockfish is in the lead, and in my opinion still Stockfish is of course much better than the Komodo Dragon engine. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. If you want to study more about the Nimzo-Indian defense, you can also check out our whole series with some other studies with some different sidelines and possibilities for both sides. And if you want to see more beautiful strategic and tactical games like this, check out my commented chess games played by computer series. Here's also the link of our playlist, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.